Forget for a moment the floating islands, the keyboard wizards in their silver capes, and the 20-minute epics about cosmic unity. Forget the immaculate and monolithic image that the history of progressive rock has bequeathed to us, a perfectly composed photograph hanging in the gallery of musical memory. That image, as iconic as it may be, is a magnificent stained glass window, but one that casts long shadows and conceals the complex, and at times brutal architecture that supports it. The true saga of Yes is not a mystical John Anderson poem. It is a Shakespearean drama of ambition, betrayal, exile, and redemption. It is a chronicle of calculated artistic sacrifices, of forced reinventions that bordered on the absurd, and of a silent civil war waged in recording studios, boardrooms, and on brightly lit stages for over 5 decades. Today, we're not just going to revisit Yes. We are going to perform an autopsy. We will place the entity under the microscope, dissecting its sonic engineering projects, its corporate alliances, and the psychological fractures that forged, destroyed, and miraculously rebuilt this band time and time again. Prepare yourself, because what you are about to discover will forever redefine your listening and your understanding of one of the most ambitious forces in modern music. And so that we can continue to unravel these secrets together, I ask you to do something crucial right now. Subscribe to the PsychProg channel, turn on notifications so you don't miss our future investigations, leave a like so the algorithm understands the relevance of this work, and, above all, share this documentary. Your active participation is what makes this musical archaeology possible. Our excavation begins in 1968 in a feverish London, a city that was a cauldron of influences. American West Coast psychedelia had collided with British blues tradition, Soho jazz, and the classical avant-garde, generating an environment of unprecedented experimentation. It is at the La Chasse Club, a meeting point for musicians looking for work, that fate brings together 2 young men whose musical visions were like yin and yang. On one side, John Anderson, a former milkman from the north of England, vocalist for the band The Warriors, possessing an almost angelic countertenor voice and a mind populated by visions of universal harmony, influenced as much by Simon and Garfunkel as by the classical composer Jean Sibelius. On the other side, Chris Squire, a Londoner by birth, a former choir boy who dropped out of school to dive into the music scene, developing an approach to the electric bass that was at once melodic, percussive, and aggressive. Squire, who had played in the psychedelic band The Sin, didn't see the bass as a foundational instrument, but as a second lead guitar. The idea born from their conversation that night was not, as the myth suggests, to immediately form a symphonic rock band. It was something more subtle and perhaps more radical for the time. To merge the complex vocal harmonies of American pop groups like The Association and The Fifth Dimension with the muscle and improvisational freedom of British jazz rock, which had its greatest exponent in bands like Cream. To bring this hybrid vision to life, they needed musicians who were both virtuous and malleable. The first to be recruited was drummer Bill Bruford, an intellectual of rhythm who was studying economics and was deeply influenced by jazz masters like Max Roach and Art Blakey. Bruford was not a mere timekeeper. He saw the drums as a melodic instrument, capable of dialoguing with the other musicians rather than just supporting them. His precise and polyrhythmic technique would become one of the band's most distinctive signatures. Next came keyboardist Tony Kaye. In an era when rock keyboardists were turning to the exotic sounds of the mellotron and early synthesizers, Kaye was a purist. His passion was the organic and visceral sound of the Hammond organ, which he played with the force and fervor of an R&B musician, adding an earthy weight that anchored Anderson's ethereal aspirations. Finally, the original lineup was completed by guitarist Peter Banks. Banks, who came from the band Mabel Greer's Toy Shop, an embryo of Yes itself, is perhaps the most tragic and misunderstood figure in the band's history. Often dismissed as a mere precursor to Steve Howe, Banks possessed a powerful musical identity of his own. He was a guitarist with agile and inventive phrasing, an amalgam of the jazz elegance of Wes Montgomery and the sonic aggression of Pete Townshend. This original lineup was, in essence, a powder keg of talent and ego. The first 2 albums, Yes, 1969, and Time and a Word, 1970, are the sonic documents of this proto-progressive phase, the chronicle of a band discovering its own identity in real time. The debut album is a work of remarkable confidence, Songs like Beyond and Before already demonstrate the embryonic formula. Intricate vocal harmonies, time signature changes, and instrumental sections where Banks and Kay duel over the complex rhythmic foundation of Squire and Bruford. The most telling, however, are the covers. The transformation of the Beatles' Every Little Thing from a 2-minute pop song into a nearly 6-minute epic with a dark introduction and a long improvisational section was a declaration of intent. They were not a cover band. They were deconstructors. However, internal tensions were already beginning to surface. Anderson and Squire, the main songwriters, dreamed of increasingly grandiose and symphonic arrangements. Banks, on the other hand, wanted more space for the guitar, for the spontaneity of improvisation. The definitive breaking point came with the second album, Time and a Word. Against the wishes of Banks and Bruford, Anderson and Squire made the yet controversial decision to hire a string and brass orchestra to layer over the band's arrangements. The result was a rich and majestic sound, but one that, on many tracks, effectively buried Banks's guitar in the mix, treating it as a secondary element. For Banks, it was an artistic betrayal. The decision sealed his fate. Even before the album's release, he was fired in a cold and pragmatic manner. It was the first of many sacrifices on the altar of the uncompromising artistic vision that governed Yes. The dismissal of Peter Banks, though painful, opened the door for the musician who would allow Yes to transcend its origins and build its true sonic cathedrals, Steve Howe. Steve Howe's entry in 1970 was the catalyst that transformed Yes from a promising band into a genre-defining force. Howe was not just a guitarist. He was a musical polymath, a collector of sounds and styles. His technique was not limited to rock. He mastered classical guitar, flamenco, Chet Atkins country picking, and the jazz of Django Reinhardt. More importantly, he brought with him an arsenal of instruments: electric, acoustic, and 12-string guitars, Portuguese guitars, mandolins, the vihuela, the choral electric sitar, which he used as a painter uses different brushes and colors. He didn't just play solos, he created textures, soundscapes that could be delicate and pastoral one moment, and fiercely electric the next. His arrival coincided with a surge of compositional confidence from the entire band, resulting in the Yes album, 1971. This album is the true ground zero of the classic Yes sound. It is here that all the elements fall into place for the first time. Yours Is No Disgrace is an epic built from fragments of ideas from all members, a mosaic that refuses to follow the traditional verse-chorus structure. Starship Trooper is a 3-part suite that travels from vigorous rock to a hypnotic acoustic section and a sweeping instrumental climax. And I've Seen All Good People is a stroke of genius, merging an a cappella folk anthem with a pulsating rock groove, creating an unlikely hit. The success of the Yes album gave the band the confidence to take the next radical step: the replacement of organist Tony Kaye. Kaye, with his loyalty to the Hammond, refused to incorporate the new synthesizers, like the Moog, that were beginning to revolutionize music. For Anderson and Howe, who dreamed of an even vaster and more fantastical sonic palette, this limitation was unacceptable. The split was amicable but necessary for the evolution of the band's vision. And the replacement they found was the antithesis of Kaye in every way: Rick Wakeman. Rick Wakeman was a born showman, a virtuoso with classical training at the Royal College of Music and a veteran of recording sessions for artists like David Bowie. His is the iconic piano on Life on Mars, T-Rex, and Cat Stevens. He didn't just embrace the new keyboard technology, he turned it into a spectacle. Surrounded by a fortress of Moog synthesizers, mellotrons, clavichords, and pianos, Wakeman brought a romantic and baroque sensibility to Yes's music. His ability to play complex arpeggios, grandiose fanfares, and lyrical melodies added the final piece to the puzzle. With the lineup of Anderson, Squire, Bruford, Howe, and Wakeman, Yes was complete. This lineup, which would last for only 2 albums, is universally considered the classic lineup and would produce what many consider the apex of progressive rock. The first fruit of this union, Fragile, 1971, was a risky and brilliant move. To speed up production, the band decided to intersperse 4 group songs with 5 solo vignettes, each composed and performed by one member. It was a move that not only showcased individual virtuosity, but also revealed the psyche of each musician. Anderson's piece, We Have Heaven, was an ethereal vocal canon. Howe's Mood for a Day, a stunning flamenco guitar piece. Wakemann's Cans and Brahms, an adaptation of the classical composer. Squire's The Fish, Schindleria Praematuris, was a manifesto for the bass as a lead instrument, with overlapping layers of different effects. And Bruford's The Dissonant and Chaotic 5% for Nothing, at only 35 seconds, was a scathing critique of the percentage managers received. The album was a resounding success, driven by the hit Roundabout, a song that perfectly encapsulated the Yes philosophy, technical complexity disguised as a catchy melody. With the success of Fragile, the band was given carte blanche by their label, Atlantic Records, and the support of a crucial sonic architect, engineer and producer Eddie Offord. Offord was the unofficial sixth member during this era, a studio wizard who developed innovative techniques to capture the band's sonic complexity. He pioneered the use of adhesive tape to isolate sections of the recording tape, allowing the band to record perfect takes of small sections and splice them together, an essential technique for building their long and intricate musical structures. With this creative and technical freedom, they embarked on their masterpiece, Close to the Edge, 1972. This album consists of just 3 tracks, with the title piece occupying an entire side of the vinyl. Close to the Edge is not a song. It is a rock symphony. Its structure, loosely based on sonata form, journeys through sections of sonic chaos, pastoral interludes, organ fugues, and choral climaxes, all unified by a lyrical theme of spiritual quest inspired by Hermann Hesse's novel Siddhartha. Hermann is the pinnacle of the Yes vision, music as a transformative journey. However, the creation of this masterpiece came at a cost. The recording process was meticulous and exhausting, with Anderson and Howe dictating the structure in an almost dictatorial, note-by-note fashion. For Bill Bruford, a jazz musician who prized spontaneity and improvisation, this building block method was artistically suffocating. Immediately after the album's completion, at the absolute peak of the band's success and prestige, Bruford made the shocking decision to leave and join King Crimson, a band with a darker, more improvisational approach. His departure was a profound blow, the end of the golden era, and a reminder that creative genius often walks hand in hand with personal conflict. The band's visual identity, as crucial as the music, was forged in this same period by the hand of Roger Dean. The relationship between Yes and Dean is a prime example of artistic symbiosis. Dean was not a mere hired illustrator. He became the visual architect of the Yes world. His first cover for the band, Fragile, already introduced elements of his unique style, planets, organic spacecraft, and a sense of cosmic scale. But it was with Close to the Edge that his vision fully merged with the band's, creating the first of his iconic surreal landscapes of floating islands, gravity-defying waterfalls, and impossible rock formations. These images were not mere decorations, they were portals. They provided a visual context for the music, suggesting that the band's sonic journeys took place in a parallel universe, a place of wonder and strangeness. The classic Yes logo, with its fluid organic letters, created by Dean in 1972, became one of the most enduring and recognizable symbols in music, a brand that instantly communicated a sense of otherworldliness. This synergy extended to the stage. Dean's stage designs, with structures resembling the bones of prehistoric creatures or giant crystals, transformed Yes concerts into theatrical and immersive experiences, long before the term immersive experience became a marketing cliché. Yes understood, from the beginning, that progressive rock in its highest form was not just a musical genre, but a total art form, where sound, word, and image intertwined to create a cohesive and compelling mythology. And if this journey so far has opened your mind to new perspectives on Yes, remember that your support allows us to continue this exploration. Check if you are already subscribed to PsychProg and if you've left a like. Every click makes a difference in our ability to bring you more content like this. With Bruford's departure, Yes recruited Alan White, a powerful drummer who had played with John Lennon and George Harrison. White lacked Bruford's jazzy subtlety, but brought a force and solidity that perfectly suited the band's increasingly grandiose sound. His debut was on the ambitious double album, Tales from Topographic Oceans, 1973. This album is perhaps the most controversial in the band's discography, and represents either the peak of Yes's ambition or the point where ambition became excess. The concept, conceived by Anderson, was inspired by a footnote in Paramahansa Yogananda's book, Autobiography of a Yogi, which described 4 bodies of Hindu scriptures. Each of the album's 4 tracks, occupying one side of the vinyl, was intended to be a musical interpretation of one of these texts. The recording process became legendary for its eccentricity. The studio was decorated to look like a farm, complete with hay and cardboard animals, and the band adhered to a strictly vegetarian diet. For Rick Wakeman, the abstraction of the concept and the seemingly endless, unstructured nature of the compositions were the final straw. He felt the music had become pretentious and self-indulgent, a sentiment he notoriously expressed by eating a curry on stage during a show on the tour. His frustration culminated in his first departure from the band shortly after the Tales tour. The album divided critics and fans, and to this day is seen as the ultimate symbol of progressive rock's excesses. However, a careful listen reveals moments of sublime beauty and stunning instrumental complexity, a work that demands patience but rewards the dedicated listener. Wakeman's departure led to the hiring of Swiss keyboardist Patrick Moraz, a musician with a strong background in jazz and fusion. His arrival injected new energy into the band, resulting in the album Relayer, 1974. This is one of Yes's most intense and underrated works. The centerpiece, The Gates of Delirium, inspired by Tolstoy's War and Peace, is a nearly 22-minute tour de force that depicts a sonic battle. It is Yes at its most dissonant, chaotic, and aggressive, with almost metal guitar riffs and frantic duels between Howe's guitar and Moraz's synthesizers. The battle resolves into the beautiful and serene coda, Soon, one of John Anderson's most moving melodies. Relayer showed a darker, more visceral side of the band, proving they could be as fierce as they were ethereal. After the Relayer tour, the exhausted band decided to take a break and, in an unprecedented move, all 5 members released solo albums simultaneously in 1975-76. The solo projects of Anderson, alias of Sunhillow, and Squire, Fish Out of Water, were particularly successful and revealing, showing that the band's 2 main creative forces had complete and coherent visions of their own. When the band reconvened, Rick Wakeman was persuaded to return, and the result was Going for the One, 1977. This album marked a stylistic shift, with shorter, more direct and energetic songs. Tracks like the title track and Parallels were vigorous rockers, while Wondrous Stories became an unlikely hit single in the UK. The album culminated with Awaken, a 15-minute epic that many consider the last great masterpiece of the classic era, a piece that combines the grandeur of Close to the Edge with the band's newfound energy. Success seemed to have returned, but the cracks were deepening. The next album, Tormato, 1978, was a problematic affair. Recorded amidst the height of the punk movement, which despised everything Yes represented, the band seemed unsure of its direction. The album is a collection of uneven songs, with brilliant moments like On the Silent Wings of Freedom, alongside weaker tracks, and a production that sounded dated. The famous cover, showing the band being hit by a tomato, was, according to legend, an expression of the band's own frustration with the final result. The crisis deepened during recording sessions for a new album in Paris in 1979. Musical disagreements and interference from wives and girlfriends created a toxic environment. Unable to agree on a direction, exhausted and disillusioned, John Anderson and Rick Wakeman made the drastic decision to leave the band they had helped define. To the outside world, it seemed to be the definitive end of Yes. And it is here that our narrative plunges into the eye of the storm, the point of greatest tension and the ultimate proof of the band's resilience, or stubbornness. What could Yes be without its celestial voice and its sonic keyboard architect? The response from Chris Squire, Steve Howe, and Alan White was one of the most audacious, controversial, and fascinating moves in rock history. Instead of dissolving the band, they decided to continue. And the musicians they invited to fill the vacant spots came from a seemingly opposite musical universe. Trevor Horn and Jeff Downes were the duo behind the Buggles, whose synth-pop hit, Video Killed the Radio Star, had become the anthem of the new era of electronic music and MTV. The union was so bizarre it seemed like a bad joke to purist fans. However, Horn and Downes were avowed Yes fans and, more importantly, extremely talented musicians and producers. The result of this unlikely fusion was the 1980 album Drama. Drama is the most misunderstood and reassessed piece in the entire Yes catalog. At the time, it was met with hostility from much of the fan base. Horn's voice, though technically capable of hitting the high notes, lacked Anderson's spiritual quality. His delivery was colder, more theatrical, and dystopian. Downes's keyboards, filled with new wave synth sounds, replaced Wakeman's Baroque romanticism. The overall sound was heavier, more angular, and surprisingly aggressive. The opening track, Machine Messiah, is a 10-minute suite that merges prog complexity with an almost metal weight, a precursor to what would become progressive metal. Does It Really Happen? Is a reworking of an old band jam with a funky and powerful bass line from Squire. Into the Lens is an adaptation of a Buggles song, transformed into a prog pop epic. For years, Drama was treated as an anomaly, a bastard appendage in the discography. Today, however, with the distance of time, it reveals itself as a monumental act of artistic courage. It is the sound of Yes refusing to become a museum piece, adapting drastically to survive the changing musical climate. Drama proves that the band's essence lay not just in its most iconic figures, but in the incredible rhythmic and harmonic architecture built by Squire, Howe, and White. A structure robust enough to support a vocalist and a keyboardist from a completely different musical paradigm. To listen to Drama is to witness a band at war with itself and the world, producing a masterpiece of tension and power. The Drama lineup, however, was too volatile to last. The pressure of replacing a legend like John Anderson was overwhelming for Trevor Horn, who faced a hostile reception from audiences during the tour. The band broke up once again in early 1981. It seemed that this time, the end was real. Howe and Downes formed the supergroup Asia, which achieved massive commercial success. Squire and White attempted to form a new band with Led Zeppelin's Jimmy Page, a project that did not move forward. But the seed of reinvention had been planted, and from it would sprout the biggest commercial success in the band's history and its greatest paradox. Squire and White, refusing to let the name die, began working with a young and talented South African guitarist, songwriter, and producer named Trevor Rabin. Rabin's musical philosophy was the antipode of Steve Howe's. Where Howe was a stylist, a painter of soundscapes with a cerebral approach, Rabin was an architect of arena anthems, a master of the catchy riff, the virtuosic guitar solo, and polished pop production, aligned with the AOR, album-oriented rock, sound that dominated American radio. Together with original keyboardist Tony Kaye, whose direct and no-frills approach fit the new aesthetic perfectly, they formed a new group called Cinema. The material they developed was powerful, melodic, and undeniably commercial. But one piece was missing. In a twist worthy of a movie script, Chris Squire played the demos for an exiled and disillusioned John Anderson. Captivated by the energy and melodic potential of the songs, Anderson agreed to join the project. The producer chosen to polish this unlikely fusion? None other than Trevor Horn, the former Drama vocalist, who had become one of the most innovative and sought-after producers on the planet. The Cinema project was renamed Yes, and the result was 90125, 1983. The album, propelled by the #1 global hit Owner of a Lonely Heart, was a commercial colossus that introduced Yes to a new generation of MTV fans. For old fans, the shock was seismic. This was a Yes with breakdance beats, orchestra samples, courtesy of Horn's revolutionary Fairlight CMI sampler, and a sound designed for the dance floor. However, to analyze 90125 merely as a commercial concession is a gross error. It is a masterpiece of sound design and stylistic fusion. The song Changes combines Rabin's pop sensibility with the rhythmic complexity of classic Yes. Cinema won a Grammy for Best Rock Instrumental Performance. Leave It is a tour de force of a cappella vocal production. 90125 is the sound of Yes appropriating the technological and aesthetic language of the 80s, and, instead of being swallowed by it, completely mastering it to create something vibrant and new. The coexistence of two such powerful and distinct creative forces, the progressive tradition personified by Anderson and the modernity of Rabin, would inevitably generate friction. The follow-up album, Big Generator, 1987, had a notoriously difficult production, with power struggles between Anderson and Rabin over the musical direction. The album was a success, but it did not reach the heights of 90125, and internal tensions were reaching a boiling point. And this brings us to the most surreal and soap-operatic chapter in the Yes saga. A moment of pure disbelief that left the rock world perplexed. In the late 80s, frustrated with the increasingly commercial direction, Anderson left again. But this time, instead of stepping away from music, he reunited with the royalty of classic Yes, Bill Bruford, Rick Wakeman, and Steve Howe. As the name, Yes, was legally owned by the faction led by Squire and Rabin, dubbed Yes West by fans, as it was based in California, the quartet launched under the descriptive acronym Anderson, Bruford, Wakeman, Howe, ABWH. Their debut album, released in 1989, was a declaration of aesthetic war. It was a deliberate return to the symphonic, mystical, and complex sound of the golden era. A direct response to the Americanized sound of 90125 and Big Generator. The world, for a brief and bizarre period, had two versions of the same band on tour, each claiming the true legacy of Yes. The situation was commercially confusing and legally untenable. The record labels, seeing an unprecedented marketing opportunity, pushed for a solution that seemed brilliant on paper, but proved to be a disaster in practice. The definitive reunion. The result was the album Union, 1991, a project that promised to unite the 8 members of the two factions into a single supergroup. The cover featured all 8 musicians, and the subsequent tour was a grand spectacle. The expectation was for an epic album, the synthesis of two worlds. The reality, however, was a Frankenstein's monster stitched together in the studio. Union is notoriously one of the most fraudulent albums in rock history. The session tapes from both bands were handed over to producer Jonathan Elias, who, without the consent of most of the musicians, hired a legion of session players to re-record, replace or sweeten the original parts. Guitarist Jimmy Hahn, for example, played most of what were supposed to be Steve Howe's guitar parts. Rick Wakeman stated that he sent his tapes by mail, and that what he heard on the final album had almost nothing to do with what he played, nicknaming the album Onion, because it made him cry. Union is a cynical artifact, a document of marketing's victory over art, a portrait of how industry interference can completely disfigure artistic vision. The tour was a public success, a delight for fans who could see all the legends on the same stage. But the Union was a sham, an armed truce that fell apart as soon as the lights went down, revealing the deep scars and irreconcilable musical philosophies that had always defined the band. The 8-man lineup dissolved, and Yes continued with the Yes West lineup for one more album, Talk, 1994. This album, though a commercial failure, is technologically significant, being one of the first rock albums recorded entirely on a computer hard drive system. Pieces like The Calling and the sweet Endless Dream showed that the Rabin-Anderson partnership could still produce high-quality music, but the era had come to an end. Trevor Rabin left for a successful career composing Hollywood film scores, closing the most commercial and controversial chapter in Yes's history. The late 1990s and early 2000s saw the band attempting to reconnect with its classic past. The Union lineup, with Howe and Wakeman back in the fold, recorded the albums Keys to Ascension, which mixed live tracks with new studio material, and later, The Ladder, 1999, produced by Bruce Fairbairn, known for his work with Aerosmith and Bon Jovi. The Ladder was a successful attempt to merge progressive complexity with modern, accessible production. The high point of this period of rediscovery came with Magnification, 2001. Without a permanent keyboardist at the time, the band made the bold decision to record an entire album with a full symphony orchestra, not as an adornment, but as an integral part of the band. The result was a lush and majestic work, the final realization of the orchestral dream they had harbored since Time and a Word, over 30 years earlier. It was a beautiful, full-circle moment. However, stability was never Yes's strong suit. After another tour, John Anderson was forced to step away due to serious respiratory health issues. In a move that shocked and permanently divided the fan base, the remaining members, led by Squire, decided to continue without him, recruiting vocalist Benoit David from a Yes tribute band. David was later replaced by John Davison, who remains the vocalist to this day. The band recorded 2 more studio albums, Fly From Here, 2011, which curiously revisited and expanded unused material from the drama era, and Heaven and Earth, 2014. This latter album would be the final studio testament for the heart and soul of the band. On June 27, 2015, Chris Squire, the only member to have played on every Yes album, the keeper of the flame, the sonic and ideological anchor, passed away, after a battle with leukemia. His death marked, for many, the true end of the band as a continuous entity. Although the group continues to tour and honor the legacy, the loss of its gravitational constant was a blow from which the identity of Yes may never fully recover. The journey through the unknown side of Yes thus reveals a counterintuitive and profoundly human truth. The band's greatness and longevity lie not in its consistency, but precisely in its contradictions, in its almost superhuman ability to self-destruct and be reborn from the ashes in radically new and unexpected forms. It is the chronicle of a band that survived the loss of its founding guitarist, its iconic voice, twice, its legendary keyboardist, multiple times, its original drummer, and finally, its cornerstone. And yet, in each phase, it found ways to produce relevant art, be it symphonic, pop, metallic, or orchestral. Yes teaches us that artistic identity need not be a fixed monolith, but can be a living, constantly mutating organism, a painful and glorious process of change, conflict, and adaptation. The fantastic and utopian facade of their covers conceals a factory of drama, innovation, and compromise that is far more complex, messy, and ultimately, far more fascinating. If this deep dive into the hidden and multifaceted history of Yes resonated with you, if it has altered the way you listen to these songs, know that this is the kind of musical archaeology we practice here weekly. The universe of rock is a cosmos of untold stories, and we are here to map it. I invite you now to become an integral and permanent part of this expedition. Subscribe to Rock Experiencia Prague, turn on notifications to be the first to know about our new discoveries, and explore our vast video archive. There are many more secrets to be unraveled, many more giants to be dissected. The journey is just beginning.